Do we have any questions?
I'm Lerato from LexisNexis. Okay, I have two questions, but I'll ask it in one. What's your view on copyright infringement? I know Brian touched on the Africanism element of the right to education, right? But now that is what students are advocating for, that it's my right to gain access to content for my education. So I want to know what your view is on copyright infringement, and do you guys have a plan set for the policing within that space?
Okay. My view about infringement is that infringement is a very sexy word for crime, for theft. You know, basically when you're using somebody's property without permission, that's what you're doing. You are depriving them of the right to enjoy their creation, the right to grant other the correct permission to utilize, right? And I think it was mentioned earlier, like the similarity between intellectual property and physical property. I'll make an example. If you go into somebody's house and occupy it without paying rent, without his permission, everyone will know that you're hijacking that space, you're doing something wrong. And there's no difference between doing that with somebody's copyright.
So let me follow up and say, how far do we go when we talk about things like fair usage, for example?
Now, as Brian earlier said, the copyright's aim is to maintain a balance, to give access to the use. So nobody wants to build a house and nobody lives in it. Again, or property must be enjoyed, right? So the idea is that there should be a balance, and balance means that it's fairness. It should be fair to the creator, that they should be remunerated. It should be fair to the student, as you say, to have access, to the business person to have access. The question is, where do you place that balance?
All right, how do you police it?
I mean, sorry, if I can just add on to what Lazarus is saying as well, I think it's very important to note also the concept around why copyright legislation exists. It was established to promote innovation. It is established to encourage people to create new work so that they can benefit financially from that as well. It's also important to understand from a student perspective, yes, okay, I'd like to understand how I can access this work now at this stage of my career so that I can grow. But then what happens when I'm at the stage of my career, when I want to contribute with content? How am I going to benefit from that? So I think I just wanted to add that on to Lazarus' point. Sorry, Brian.
When you take somebody's work and use it, we need to check whether you are doing that for the purposes of citation, for the purposes of your research or education. Are you taking more than 10% out of that? Are you doing that to try and avoid paying and therefore deprive the author of their income? And are you competing with the legitimate commercial interests of the author? Those are the checks and balances that come in there. Any copyright law that doesn't have those checks and balances, I think, in my opinion, is unfair. And as per Lazarus, I don't think we should allow politicians to get away with obfuscation of them not doing their work. What is usually presented as education, which is seductive, is actually a confusion of copyright and funding. Protecting authors' rights in their copyright does not really mean that you are undermining education, because when learners do not have books, it's a funding issue. It's not a copyright issue. So you cannot, I would like to participate in the development of the country as an author or as a publisher, but I don't want to carry that burden alone. I need the state using taxpayers' money, including the taxes that I pay, to cover that gap rather than say the author should carry it. How do we police that? I think it's quite difficult, and I think it's an education issue as well. If you think explaining copyright is difficult, try and go to a police station and say to a constable, somebody has stolen my copyright. Just try and do that and see how far you go. So there is a lot that we have to do by way of education. But I would like to plead on copyright holders also on our responsibility in terms of creating better access. The reason why there are laws and the reason why we have difficulties is that that mandate is not adequately covered. So we have to be very creative around how we package our materials, how we reach out to people to be able to use those materials. If we package them in a manner that makes them inaccessible, then you will have a lot of things happening around that. And part of the role that DALRO does is precisely to facilitate that access, make it better, while it's making sure that the author and the rights holder are adequately compensated.
All right, we had a question. Yes, there you go. We had a question over there.
I know that the Copyright Amendment Bill has been passed by the National Assembly. I just wanted to ask, what are the main features of this bill, and how does it assist creatives for the better? Thank you.
Well, the copyright bill, right? I was hoping it never comes up tonight. the bane of our lives. Well, first of all, I think that the intention of the copyright bill was noble. All right, it was to protect the creators, but also to give access to works, to copyrighted works, as Brian said. Unfortunately, that balance was lost somewhere in the politicking. As you know, the one thing we do well in South Africa is bring politics into everything. And so that balance has unfortunately been lost somewhere, to the extent that, in our opinion, I should say, that balance has been skewed and it's become prejudicial to the creator, in that there is a broad, it brings across a very broad exception for things like education, and that may be interpreted to mean that now you can do anything you like as long as it's for reasons of education, depriving creators of their income. And I think it could have been better written, could have been better drafted.
Yeah, I think the other problem is that if you put it together with the Performance Amendment Bill, you have an indigestible amalgamation of things that are not related. So where it scores better for creators in the performance area, it actually undermines those that are in the literary field. Because some of the things that they are trying to achieve there have been part of the tradition that you have in publishing and in writing. But I think they just lumped up too many things that are not related. The other thing I think is lack of understanding of the commercial reality around these activities. If you talk about education in Europe, we are probably talking about 30% of the publishing sector. If you talk about education in Africa, you are talking of up to 95% of the market that you are dealing with. So if you want to be liberal and permissive around how the materials are used in education, you are probably undermining at least 60% of that market. And everything else becomes non-viable, because even the non-education materials are sustained by the activities in education. So I think we are throwing the baby away with the bathwater, and there's a lot of proper interrogation that has to happen, especially from an education perspective as well.
But
And
to be
perhaps-
fair, there is some small positive side to it, especially for visual artists, that it brings, it now provides for the resale right, for artistic resale right, which we have been advocating for and lobbying for many years, and hopefully that's the one thing that, even though we advocate for this bill to be changed still, to be making, that will stay, that the visual artists will now enjoy that right, which is enjoyed in the civilized world.